it's Anthony here at Talk and Review, and today we're talking Game of Thrones Season 8, Episode 4, titled The Last of the Starks. So this episode very much feels like a mopping up session of what came before with regards to the battle at Winterfell. The start of the episode sees those that lived through the battle going through the funeral rituals for those that unfortunately didn't survive. We then move on to the celebrations in Winterfell, and this is where the first interesting point of the episode comes along, really, because you've got Daenerys, who is very much feeling extremely isolated at this point whenever she looks around and whenever she stares at anyone having fun or anyone drinking and having a laugh. She's basically there alone and no one's actually drinking or celebrating with her. She looks to her right and Jon's there with the free folk. She looks further down, she sees Tyrion there with Jaime, and everywhere she looks everyone is celebrating, but no one is actually celebrating with her. And it very much is playing to the fact that she doesn't really belong in the North and she's never felt welcome in the North, and this is really just solidifying it. And then upon hearing Tormund refer to Jon as king, he obviously means king of the North and what he's been proclaimed in the past, but it means a very, very different thing to Daenerys. And I think this is the most isolated we've seen Daenerys since she's crossed over the Narrow Sea. And it makes for a very interesting dynamic going forward, because you always seem to think that she is a wild card and she could lose it at any moment, and these things are starting to mount up and you can see it weighing on her mind. And I believe it's very much going to shape what we're going to see of her going forward, especially with her and Jon. Speaking of her and Jon almost get it on again, and Jon has to refrain himself because he realises, actually, we're related here. And then they start to talk about the elephant in the room, and then this brings up the next interesting point about this episode, is the shift in Daenerys' mood depending on who she's speaking to and what she's talking about. And this is pure manipulation at the highest degree, and we see both ends of the scale here from Daenerys. So at one point in this conversation, she's on her knees pleading with Jon not to tell his family about his true heritage and his claim to the throne. And she's there saying that she loves him and she wants to be with him and she's never loved anyone like she's loved him. But then right at the last part of this conversation, Jon is still obviously very conflicted, and she flips a switch like that and basically says, this is the only way it can last, and her face goes deadpan, and she almost turns into the cruel Daenerys that we believe that we're going to get in the coming episodes. And it's very interesting to see how quickly she can switch that dynamic from loving someone to not hating them, but being as blunt as she is with them, almost trying to strike fear into the person at the same time. And as I said, it's manipulation at the highest level, and I think that she's learnt that throughout her time of growing up and getting to where she is now, and she's done very well for herself doing exactly this. She gets people on board when she needs to, and it's very easy for her to cut herself off from those ties exactly when she needs to without any remorse. And I think that's pretty much what we're going to see of Daenerys for the last 2 episodes of this season, if she survives it. So whilst all the celebrations are going on, Arya, the saviour of mankind, really is nowhere to be seen, and she is doing exactly what we would expect Arya to do, which is target practice. She has not finished. Just because she's killed the Night King and she's saved mankind as we know it, she is not finished. The Night King wasn't one of the people that were on her list, however she managed to kill them. She's still got a list to finish, and she's still extremely determined to make sure that plays out exactly how she wants to. And a supporting part of this is her saying no to Gendry, to his proposal to her. She says outright, no, that is not me, that's not what I'm about. I've never been that, and I wish you all the best going forward, but that's not me. And she's very, very true to herself. And one of the great things about Arya is that she's never really deviated from this. All the way up until now, she's never deviated from what she is and what she believes in. And I think that we've got a lot more to see from Arya for the next 2 episodes. Well, I hope we do anyway. So Jon does eventually tell Arya and Sansa about his heritage, and then Sansa then goes and tells Tyrion about it because she believes that he would be better suited on the throne than Daenerys. Now this leads on to probably one of my favourite parts about the episode, is discussions about this topic between Varys and Tyrion. This very much feels like Game of Thrones of earlier seasons, which I really, really like, the political backstabbing, conniving, plotting element of Game of Thrones, and I feel like we're thrown right into the heart of it by these discussions with Varys and Tyrion. And it provides for really good entertainment, really, because you're not too sure who's going to side with who or why they're going to side with them. And then that gives you doubt on who is going to actually survive going forward, because you think you know these characters and you think you know how they're going to play it out. But when a curveball is thrown like this, such as Varys basically saying, I will do what I need to for the good of the realm, even if that means essentially killing Daenerys. She never saw that coming. And we don't know whether or not it's going to play in Varys' favour or it's going to play in Tyrion's favour. All we know is that both of them are treading a very thin line between doing what they need to do or potentially dying in the process. And that's what I really, really like about this episode. It just, as I said, it feels very much like the Game of Thrones of old, i.e. Season 1, Season 2, where it was very political, very backstabbing and very underhand, whereas the later seasons have been a bit more action-packed. But this episode very much felt like the older ones, which I really, really enjoyed about this. And as I said, it's probably my favourite part about this episode. Okay, so probably the biggest moment, or one of the biggest moments of the episode is we lost another dragon. We lost another dragon. That's 2 down. We've only got 1 left. Rhaegal, unfortunately, lost his life to 3 bolts with unbelievable accuracy. So Rhaegal, Drogon and Daenerys are flying through to Dragonstone where the fleet is going with them, and then out of nowhere 3 bolts, 1, 2, 3, right in the chest, 1 in the wing, straight through the neck, done. Rhaegal is done. So it is a shocking moment in itself, but it does come with its faults. Now, whilst the shock value is absolutely there, it makes you sit up, it makes you alert, it brings the whole thing to your attention. I have a few issues with this scene in particular. So as I said, it comes out of nowhere, which I haven't got a problem with. So where these bolts came from was Euron's fleet, essentially. They've equipped their boats with the Scorpion crossbows, those huge crossbows that we've seen in previous seasons. They've equipped all their boats with these to fight off the dragons because they know that that's their biggest threat. Now, there's been a few problems with this scene that has been discussed online, and I've been discussing with people that I know on 2 accounts, really. One, that they were flying in open space and didn't notice this fleet. And 2, the fact that these bolts managed to hit Rhaegal 3 times in a row with 100% accuracy, yet when Daenerys charged the fleet, and about 20 bolts were fired at Drogon, not one of them hit. So there's 2 points of frustration there. Now, the first point of frustration, I can almost explain away, or I believe that I can explain away. So as Daenerys and her fleet are going towards Dragonstone, they're looking ahead. The ambush comes from the side of them, so they're not necessarily looking at either side of them. They're looking ahead, and they're almost home, so they've got really no reason to think I should look either side of me. As Drogon and Rhaegal and Daenerys turn left just to swoop around, that's when it all happens. So they've swooped left, and as they've swooped left, Daenerys is looking over at Rhaegal and looking at his injuries and probably relishing in the fact that he's still alive, and she's grateful for the fact that she's still got 2 children in her life, and that's the moment that it comes. So you can understand why no one really noticed them. Even when the fleet is so big, you can understand why no one noticed them, because they were out of sight and out of mind, and even when she was flying that way, she wasn't really looking forward. That I can almost explain away. What I can't explain away is the pinpoint accuracy in which Rhaegal was defeated, yet Drogon was completely missed. That, it almost defies logic, and it does take you out of it a little bit, because you think, well, why miss Drogon with all of them, yet hit Rhaegal enough to kill him, 3 times enough to kill him? And why didn't Daenerys swoop round to the back of the fleet and just destroy them all there? So there's a few inaccuracies, and there's a few logic missteps in this scene that doesn't ruin the episode, but it very much, because of the moment that it creates, it very much spoils that moment, and it kind of leaves a bit of a sour taste in your mouth, because you think, well, they could have easily been defeated if you swoop round and kill them, or why is it that Drogon managed to live? So you're almost asking questions around why things happen the way that they happen, rather than what you're actually looking at in the first place. And then I suppose the last thing that I really want to talk about is Missandei. So within this ambush, Euron takes Missandei, and he takes her to King's Landing to use her as bait, almost, to lure Daenerys in. Now, Daenerys goes to King's Landing with a small pack of Unsullied. I'm unsure why such a small pack, and her dragon. Now, at this point, we see how equipped King's Landing is to take on Daenerys, as there are more of these catapults, more of these Scorpion crossbows that are littered around the border of King's Landing, which very much tells you that that aerial attack that they were looking for is probably not the best way of going about it now, simply because they could kill the dragons at any given point. Now, you almost think that this is leading up to Tyrion potentially dying, because Cersei's got a look in her face that she could release her arm at any point, and those arrows are going to come straight down at Tyrion and end him. but there's something that stops her from doing it, and I think it's the next moment that she'd rather relish in this next moment than kill Tyrion outright. And rather than responding to Tyrion, rather than reacting to him, she whispers in Missandei's ears, "If you've got any last words, now will be the time." Now at this point, Missandei uses this time to go out like a full-on badass and says Dracarys. Rather than pleading for her life or rather than begging, she stands there knowing full well what's going to happen. And then at that moment, obviously the mountain lobs her head off. Now this again provides another really interesting dynamic, because whilst Missandei wasn't the biggest character, such as your Daenerys and such as your Jon Snow or Cersei, she's such an important character to a few big players. Most importantly, Daenerys and Grey Worm. Now Daenerys, upon seeing this, is absolutely furious, and I feel like this one is the straw that broke the camel's back. The amount of loss that Daenerys has faced leading up to this point, and I think that seeing Missandei get beheaded is probably, like I said, the straw that broke the camel's back, and I think now we're going to start to see a really, really aggressive way of Daenerys going forward, and I think that it may potentially be her downfall. But the other person that obviously affects is Grey Worm. Now, Grey Worm and Missandei were obviously in love with each other, and Grey Worm had to turn away, and that tells you a lot about the situation with her and Grey Worm, because Grey Worm is a seasoned soldier. He sees battle, he knows no pain, he knows no fear, yet he couldn't watch that happen. So it's going to be very interesting to see how he reacts going forward and what he's prepared to do going forward in order to avenge the death of Missandei. So overall, this episode, I actually really enjoyed this episode. There were, like I said, a few moments that took me out of it a little bit, but overall, I actually quite enjoyed it. I think it was a nice aftermath episode of what we got before, and I think it's a nice build up to what is obviously coming next, and everyone's been saying that episode 5 in this season is the biggest thing. So I think that it's a nice build up to what's to come. But like I said, it doesn't mean that there weren't problems with it, which I've discussed and I won't go into anymore. But overall, I'm giving this one a thumbs up, and I really did enjoy it. What do you think is going to happen next? Do you think Daenerys is going to be successful with her rage, or do you think she's going to be killed off and Jon's going to be much more of a prominent character? Let us know in the comment section below, and make sure you like and subscribe to the channel for future content as well. As we have been doing so far, we're going to review each episode as it comes out each week. So if you haven't checked out any of the previous weeks, go check those out in the playlist below. Make sure you check out our Facebook and Instagram account. We're updating that on a regular basis for you guys as well. So I'll see you next week for episode 5. Big things are coming. Peace!